Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to talk about Kriya Yoga and the Om vibration. So listening to subtle vibrations like the Om vibration is a practice that originally began with something called Nada Yoga. And Nada Yoga is the yoga of sound. And in Nada Yoga, it's a basic recognition that the entire cosmos is composed of vibrations. And we see in modern scientific understanding as well, the recognition that even at the atomic level, everything is vibrating. So it has these vibrations, this sound, if you will, this energy is being emitted from all particles, with the exception of something in a state of absolute zero, where the molecular motion basically ceases. Now in philosophy and in some spiritual traditions, they sometimes talk about the music of the spheres, basically a recognition that even the heavenly bodies have a vibrational component. And we see this reflected in astrology, Vedic astrology, Western astrology, Taoist astrology, and other astrology systems, where a recognition that the vibration of the planets themselves have an influence on things, right? Now there are different approaches in Nada Yoga. There's two primary ones. One is you're listening to external vibrations. This is called Anahata nada. And what this means is it might be listening to a particular sound or devotional music like Sankirtan or bhajans as a means of stimulating one's spiritual awareness, and that leading into one's meditation or enhancing one's spiritual practice. So that's the Anahata practice of Nada Yoga. The other practice, which is the most commonly used one, is called Anahata Nada Yoga. And what Anahata is listening to the internal sounds. And many different spiritual traditions in India have taken this concept and applied it to their respective spiritual paths. Anahata, the word Anahata is the same word as used for the Anahata chakra, the heart chakra. And so the term Anahata is actually a recognition that the heart has an essential influence on the way that we're able to listen to these internal sounds, if you will, these more subtle vibrations. So some Kriya Yoga schools, including Self-Realization Fellowship, have advocated listening to internal sounds and using an internal mantra, a mental mantra, to try and stimulate the listening of the sounds. An example of that is what the SRF calls the Aum Technique of Meditation, closing the tragus of the ears, basically the flaps on the outside of the ears, to close it and to be listening within with the help of an armrest, and to be mentally chanting Om continuously. Technique was not advised by Lahiri Baba, Lahiri Mahasaya. And the problem with it is that it puts the body into a very uncomfortable position, which is holding oneself rigidly, closing the ears as one is trying to internally concentrate. It basically goes against pratyahara, which is a principle of internalization in which you need to be properly aligned and relaxed, right? So Kriya Yoga Pranayama does a more effective means of bringing one inside. And if one is listening to internal subtle sounds and mentally chanting Om continuously, it's basically like a pond of water. And instead of just calming down and being able to see the surface of the water when it's very still and what is below the water, right, the more subtle vibrations, if you will, it's the chanting mentally Om continuously is like rippling the water constantly, and then you create all these disturbance patterns where you're unable to perceive the subtle vibrations because you're constantly interfering with your perception of those subtle vibrations by mentally chanting Om. So we know this technique doesn't work as well as Kriya Yoga, and what Lahiri Baba advocated, Lahiri Mahasaya, is that you listen to internal sounds rather than trying to externally isolate yourself from the sonic vibrations in the air coming into your ear, that you actually calm yourself down through Kriya Yoga Pranayama, which affects the parasympathetic nervous system, brings you into a low idle state and makes you internalize the state of pratyahara, and then you're able to more easily perceive the inner subtle sounds because you are very, very calm inside. So that's what Lahiri Baba advocated, is the internal listening of Om rather than trying to externally isolate yourself with some kind of technique, right? The Sant Mat technique of the Aum Technique of Meditation taught in SRF And so in Kriya Yoga, they talk about the spinal centers, the chakras, as actually having subtle vibrations that they emanate, and you can tune into those, right? So people will often talk about the Muladhara chakra, the chakra at the base of the spine, the coccyx area, as having a sound of a bumblebee, right? And then the Swadhisthana chakra, the chakra in the sexual area, the sacral area, as having this sound of a harp. The Manipura chakra in the navel area, having the sound of a flute. The Anahata chakra in the heart area as having the sound of a bell or a gong, and the Vishuddha chakra in the throat area as having the sound of like rushing waters, and then the Medulla or ajna chakra as having sort of a composite of all of those sounds, the roaring Om vibration, right? So there are many Kriya yogis that are trying to listen to those sounds, those internal sounds, and only those internal sounds. And the way that those sounds are described is very culturally rooted in Indian understandings of spirituality and music. And so the idea that those sounds and only those sounds could be heard emanating from those parts of the energy body is not correct. And what happens is many Kriya yogis will end up disregarding a whole series of internal vibrations and subtle sounds that they are already hearing and feeling, and then try to find those sounds. Oh, I'm not hearing the bumblebee. Oh, I'm not hearing the flute. Oh, I'm not hearing, the gong, right? And when people are only looking for those internal sounds, it becomes a problem, because what it means is it interferes with their natural unfoldment in Kriya Yoga, their natural spiritual development of hearing internal sounds, something that Lahiri Baba called Sahaja Yoga, right? Which is a direct result from being internalized and then just being open and listening, right? So those of you in Kriya Yoga who are like, oh, I haven't heard the sound of the bumblebee, so I guess I'm not aware of my base chakra, that's not correct. Likely you have heard some kind of subtle vibration that you have disregarded, right? That is coming from the area of the coccyx region. But you just haven't been aware of it because you've been looking for what your mind thinks is the bumblebee sound, right? So don't do that. Be aware of the more subtle sounds within. So here's a practical approach to being able to hear the Om vibration, the inner subtle sounds, is that begin with a neutral assessment of what your state of consciousness is before you begin your practice, right? And what you are hearing, right? Because you are always picking up subtle sounds, but you're mostly unaware of it. So I become aware of my state of consciousness. How do I feel, right? And what do I hear? Then begin your practice, whatever it is. If it's doing Maha Mudra, whatever, you begins your Kriya Yoga practice or other spiritual practice. And then in a little while, do another neutral assessment. How do you feel and what do you hear? Is there a difference? Can you perceive changes in the subtle vibration and what you're hearing? Inevitably, you'll find that you will. There's been a change, right? So something that can assist you with this whole process is the inner smile, right? So the inner smile is a Taoist internal alchemy practice. It's basically tuning into what you feel and what you hear at a particular time, accepting it fully, right? And smiling into it. What that means is you start to connect with that subtle vibration, right? That subtle energy. You're accepting it and you're forming a communication, a link to that. You're attuning yourself to that subtle vibration. And what you can do then is that when you're feeling that subtle vibration, right? It doesn't have to be a bumblebee sound. It can be something else, a higher pitch. It can be lower vibration, whatever it is. Once you tune into that, follow it to its source with the inner smile. Smile into it. Don't worry about the form. Just be aware of what you feel, tune into it, and follow it to its source. And as you do that, allow anything within yourself to unfold naturally, to transform naturally. What you will find by doing this process is that when you become aware of the subtle vibrations within, you lead you into deep states of meditation, into absorption, right? What we call dhyana, and into samadhi, right? Becoming one and following the subtle vibration to its source, you become one with it, right? So this is a very deep process. So when you understand the principles of Nadi Yoga and how to apply it to Kriya Yoga or any spiritual practice, it will be transformative for you. So you just need to explore it, right? And not disregard all the subtle vibrations that you're already feeling, already sensing, already hearing, right? So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com, Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.